feeling Roy Fairman were a great lad. He was born in 1921 as Albert Edward Fairman, but he preferred to be called Roy by his friends and family. He went to Walter St James School in Battersea, where he did really well at sport, and he must have done really well in his subjects as well, because when he left school he got a job in a bank in London, and when war broke out he was straight in there. He joined the RAF in 1939 in September. By the age of 19 he was flying bombers over occupied territory, Whitley's at first and then Lancasters, until on one flight he suffered a bad injury to his leg and foot by flak, and he had to have metal rods put in his foot. Now, he could no longer fly operationally after that, but it didn't stop him going into the ATA, the Air Transport Auxiliary. Because the RAF pilots were busy fighting, the ATA was set up to move aircraft from where they were to where they were needed and when they were needed. The pilots were trained in different classes of aircraft, e.g. two-engine aircraft or single-engine aircraft, and Roy was allowed to fly single-engine fighters. Now, the pilots could be asked to fly a particular type of fighter, whether they'd seen that type of aircraft before or not, and for this they used to use pilot notes which they'd just read before they'd set off and fly. And the ATA had in force a rule where they said that there were no aerobatics allowed strictly, and there was a cruising speed which was set for ATA aircraft being ferried, basically to get them there safely. There were 16 ferry pools around the country, and Roy was assigned to number 14 ferry pool, which was Ringway, which is now Manchester Airport. During the war there were nearly 900 P-51 Mustangs sent over from America for use by the RAF. Now, these were shipped over in containers and they were reassembled at various sites around the UK. The one that Roy was asked to fly that day was reassembled at a place called Renfrew near Glasgow, and another pilot had flown it from Renfrew down to Kirkbride, and Roy was asked to pick it up at Kirkbride and fly it down to Ringway, which is also known now as Manchester Airport. Roy taxied out and took off at about 3:20 on that cold, wet Thursday afternoon on the 15th of February 1945. He climbed up to altitude and headed south down towards Manchester, but on arriving at Manchester he found it fog-bound, so he couldn't land. He had no choice but to turn back or go somewhere else. Now, whether he decided to go back to Kirkbride and land back there, or there were a few other airfields around there which he could have possibly got into if the weather was, not bad there. And we don't know what he decided to do, but he was seen over the little village of Wrightington, just north of Manchester, at about 4:10, apparently in trouble with the aircraft. He was doing shallow dives and climbs and shallow rolls, and unusual flight really. And witnesses reported him at about 1,000 feet. Shortly after that, he was seen to leave the aircraft, and the aircraft went straight into a nosedive and crashed into the pond in the back garden of a farmhouse in Wrightington, and it exploded and blowing fragments all over the road and everything. But Roy, he landed, but his parachute hadn't had time to deploy properly, and unfortunately he died in the ambulance on the way to hospital. During the war, air crashes were covered up fairly quickly, but in 2010, after years of trying, Nick Wotherspoon and the Lancashire Air Investigation Team managed to get permission to dig up the aircraft. Now, I've only really skimmed the surface of this story in the time that I've had, but there's a lot more to the story than I've mentioned. Parts of the aircraft are now stored and on view for the public up at Hangar 42 up at Blackpool Airport, if anybody would be interested in seeing them.
Radio, Bob.
I'm not lined up yet. Russell traffic, final runway 02.
Read it off, that's it.
Power on till I get over them trees. Another one successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brake. Brake.
Yeah, brake.